Section 5. The use of biological resources. Topic A. Food production and microbes. First of all, what is crop yield and how do we increase it? So crop yield is a crop is basically just a plant that is grown by farmers for food, but it doesn't have to be something edible like barley or wheat. It could be also tobacco. And crop yield is the mass of the crop produced per area per year, and that's measured in kilograms per hectare per year. And the things that affect crop yield are basically all the limiting factors that affect photosynthesis of the plant. And that's because photosynthesis produces glucose, which is the edible part of the plant, which is the yield. But the basic idea is photosynthesis, the humidity of the environment, and intensity of sunlight. Increasing crop yield can be done, like I said before, by humidity, by photosynthesis, and by increasing the light intensity. But reducing crop yield might be because of a lack of nutrients in the soil, or because of pests such as weeds or caterpillars or insects like that. The thing with caterpillars are they eat the leaves and therefore reduce the surface area of the leaf. And because of that, it reduces the rate of photosynthesis in the leaf, therefore reducing the crop yield. The factors that limit photosynthesis are temperature, light intensity, and carbon dioxide concentration. So carbon dioxide and photosynthesis, how that works. Basically, carbon dioxide is controlled by farmers if the plant is warm enough, has good temperature, and has plenty of light and water. So the reason carbon dioxide increases the rate of photosynthesis is again because the more carbon dioxide there is, the faster the rate of photosynthesis, because it is a limiting factor in photosynthesis. But this only happens to a point, because once that point is reached, other limiting factors affect the rate of photosynthesis. And if you don't have those limiting factors increased, then there's no point in having extra photosynthesis, extra carbon dioxide. So the rate of photosynthesis goes to a stop and doesn't decrease. Then we have temperature and photosynthesis. Temperature affects photosynthesis because photosynthesis is a chemical reaction, and chemical reactions are done by enzymes. And enzymes have a particular temperature in which they work best. So increasing the temperature and reaching that particular temperature in which enzymes work best in increases the rate of photosynthesis as well. But this only happens to a point, and then it decreases because enzymes denature at a high temperature. And farmers usually would control the temperature by using heaters in glass houses, and so the temperature would increase. So what are glass houses? Glass houses are a controlled environment where farmers can control the limiting factors and other factors that control crop yield. The reason glass houses are usually made of glass is because they trap energy from the sun, and so it would increase the temperature inside the glass house compared to the rest of the environment. And other ways that farmers can control photosynthesis inside a glass house is by artificial lighting, by increasing the light intensity, artificial heating that increases the temperature, additional CO2 being let in, and regular watering of the plants. Pesticides. Pesticides are basically just substances, usually chemicals, that destroy pests but don't do anything, doesn't harm the crop plant. So the type of pesticides that you usually see are insecticides, herbicides, and fungicides. And insecticides kills insects, herbicides kills weeds, and fungicides kill fungi. And pesticides can affect crop yield by killing the harmful pests that damages the crops and therefore increasing the crop yield by decreasing the amount of damages caused by pests. So the advantages and disadvantages of pesticides are basically the advantages would be they're available almost everywhere, you can see it, and it destroys the crop-eating pest fully without leaving a few. And if used properly, it can also be very effective in a short period of time. The disadvantages are it's very expensive, it's toxic, and can cause health problems in humans. It causes environmental damage, such as air, soil, water pollution, and it also may be harmful for non-targeted species of plant, as well as pesticides can be carried away by the wind, affecting other animals outside of the glasshouse. And biological control. It's another way to get rid of pests inside a controlled environment. So biological control is basically introducing a biological organism that will eat the pest but not the crop plant. The most used biological control is done by bringing in birds that will kill and eat caterpillars. The advantages and disadvantages of biological control is there aren't any chemicals contributing to biological control, and the pest isn't going to develop a resistance against the predator. And it's also non-destructive to other plants, and it's effective and controllable. The disadvantages, however, are that the predators might stop eating the pests and would switch to the crop instead. And it's a very slow process and needs a lot of time to train. It's also very expensive and the supply is low, and it doesn't completely wipe out the pests. Now, fertilizer. There are three types of nutrients that fertilizers are usually made of. Nitrates, made of nitrogen, that are essential for making plant proteins. Phosphates, made of phosphorus, that are essential for making DNA in plant membranes. And potassium, that's essential for plant membranes. But the thing is, the nutrients must be dissolved in water first, because in the actual environment, plants would absorb nutrients through their roots in the soil. So the advantages and disadvantages of fertilizer are that the crop yield can be increased and more food can be produced, and also helps produce biofuels. But the disadvantages are it can pollute groundwater and can lead to death of aquatic organisms by eutrophication. Now, food production using microorganisms. Yogurt production is through the bacterium that's called lactobacillus, and this bacterium turns milk into yogurt. So it uses lactose sugar in the milk to produce lactic acid by anaerobic respiration. This lactic acid that's produced by the bacterium affects the milk proteins, and so it makes the milk curdle or going solid, and therefore makes a yogurt-like consistency. And that's why yogurt is more sour than milk. Next is fermentation and yeast. So yeast respires anaerobically and produces carbon dioxide and ethanol. So this ethanol is used usually for making beer. So to make beer, barley seeds are allowed to germinate by soaking them in warm water. And this soaking in warm water is called malting. The germinating barley seeds then break down their carbohydrate stores and release the sugar. So after a couple of days, the barley seeds are gently roasted and kills them. Then the leftover carbohydrate or sugar is put into a fermenter with the yeast. And then this yeast uses the sugar for anaerobic respiration and makes the glucose, the sugar, into ethanol and produces beer. So one thing that's very important is knowing how a fermenter works. So okay. Important details of the fermenter are that the cooling jacket or the water jacket, it keeps the microorganisms or the yeast at optimum temperature, so they produce heat through respiration because they produce heat through respiration and therefore need to be cooled. The paddles, the stirring paddles, they keep stirring the mixture. This stops waste products from building up and keeps the air evenly mixed. Then the nutrient medium, this thing, supplies the microorganisms with fuel for respiration. Then a sterile air supply, this supplies clean oxygen for respiration, but this air supply isn't needed when the yeast is producing ethanol anaerobically. And there's also a data logger, should be here, that monitors the temperature and the pH level and keeps the fermenter at optimum conditions for the enzymes to work. Lastly, we have fish farming. So fish are usually kept in fish farms because they're a very good source of protein for humans. And fish farms keep a lot of fish in very small tanks to minimize the space requirements. And this would cause competition between fish for space, for waste, for food and everything. To prevent this competition, there are a few methods that people do. There is intraspecific competition that's between species of fish. So to prevent this, farmers usually keep the different species of fish in different tanks so that stops the competition between the fish. And there's also interspecific competition that's between fish of the same species. So to prevent this, fish are usually kept in different tanks because of different ages. So older fish might be put in a tank with older fish only within their own species, and younger fish would be kept within their species in a different tank. Also, different genders are kept separately because they don't want them to breed, because they use selective breeding, so only the best fish are chosen to breed. And also there's quality control, where water quality is affected. So there is a sterile water supply that's always given, that's continuously supplied. And this also makes it so that waste is washed away with the old water. This sterile water supply also makes it so that the fish are limited to diseases. And that this is good because in cramped ponds like was used in fish farming, diseases would spread very quickly. For food, fish are often overfed with protein-rich food so that they would have more protein that benefits us. And sometimes hormones are added to the water or to the food so that the growth would speed up. And like I said before, selective breeding is done so that only the best fish are bred, and that produces more good protein-rich fish. And that's it for food production and microbes.